If you've read my book, Cracking the Rich Code, you know it is chock full of fantastic advice from top thought leaders and super successful entrepreneurs from around the world. How would you like to be a member of an exclusive community that provides that same how to content from those same leaders? What if you were able to attend member only live events and interact with them? I'd like to invite you to join the Rich Code Club. It will change the way you think about yourself, your money, and your life. It's the only social media platform purely focused on helping you grow. Join the Rich Code Club today for free by clicking on the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Communication 24/7 podcast, where we communicate about how we communicate. I'm your host, Jennifer Furlong. I am so happy today to be able to welcome a fellow communication expert in the house, Brenden. I am so happy that you are here. You are founder of MasterTalk, and you coach executives and entrepreneurs to be top 1% communicators. That is something I'm really interested in hearing more about. And something else I wanted to talk with you about, because I think this is something after my own heart. You are host of the popular YouTube channel called MasterTalk. And the reason I'm so excited to talk to you about this is you have the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. You sound like me. I think you might be my brother from another mother. So this is going to be a lot of fun to talk with you about this. Brenden Kumarasamy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jen. It's such a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a quote. I'm looking on your profile page here, and it says, quote, "I believe the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach, so it's my duty to help her succeed with my free resources." That's amazing. So what prompted this? What's the history behind this?
It's funny. I never usually start a podcast with this story, but this will be the first one. So let's jump into it.
Awesome.
So it's 2014, Jen, and Taylor Swift wins this award, called Woman of the Year. It's like a music company called Billboard. And she stares at the audience and she says, "Your future Woman of the Year is 11 years old right now. She's in choir. Wants to sing. She's learning how to play piano. She has big dreams to be a great singer. And our job is to take care of her." And then what happens, as I'm watching this video, it's like a few months ago, it flashed forward 6 years later. And Billie Eilish becomes the youngest inductee in the history of Billboard to win Woman of the Year, like the age of 17. She's barely a woman. She's super talented. She wins the award. She gets on the stage. She's got her big puffy jacket, her big puffy glasses, and she's rambling in her speech. Oh my God, like I didn't prepare for this speech. And she just keeps rambling. But then the last 30 seconds completely changes my life, Jen. She looks at the audience and says, "Yeah, it was like 2014. I was watching Taylor Swift and I was 11 years old.
Oh.
And I was in choir and I was learning how to sing. And you all took care of me. So thank you." And then she walked off the stage. And when I heard that, Jen, I thought immediately about the next Elon Musk. Because when Elon Musk was 13 years old living in South Africa, nobody cared about him. Nobody sat him down and said, "Hey, you need some communication help." And he still became successful. But he would have had an easier road if he just had somebody sit him down and fix all of his filler words. But then I thought about the next Elon. Because the next Elon is a 7-year-old girl in Cambodia. We don't know who that person is. And I know for sure they can't afford a communication coach. And it's in that moment I realized what my calling was, which was, yeah, sure, I'll have a successful career. And I'm grateful to have had that. But on that trajectory, I might as well unlock communication for the rest of the world.
That is absolutely amazing. I love that story, and it makes me think back to my childhood. You know, for young girls, and even to this day, we live in 2022. And when you look up, let's say you Google the top speakers, in the world, there's only a handful of women that pop up on all of these lists. And so to have that goal to reach out to all of these young girls to give them, the tools that they need in order to be successful. Because we all know communication, if you could be an effective communicator, it has a positive impact, not only on your personal life, but your professional life, your health. The research shows people who are more effective at communicating are healthier, physically, mentally, emotionally. So, what an incredible goal that you have to reach out to these young people to help them strive to become the best version of themselves that they could be. That's just absolutely amazing. So, with MasterTalk, that's your YouTube channel. How many have you been able to reach out to so far with the work that you're doing?
For the channel, I think the channel's around 28,000, something like that. And some of our videos have done pretty well, probably like in the hundreds of thousands of views. So yeah, super grateful. I'm honestly shocked, to be honest, Jen, to see what I've been able to do in a very short life so far. Because I only started Master Talk when I was 22, and I started coaching on communication. I was 19.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting journey to get to this place in my career this quickly. So yeah, it shocks me, but I think it's a lesson for all of us. When you're really focused and you know why you do something, you'll be able to get the job done and create the impact that you're called to serve.
Yeah. So this is a great communication related question. You were 19 when you started coaching. How did you convince others that they would be able to learn something from a 19-year-old that is going to actually help them get to the next level? What resources did you pull from? What did you do to convince them?
Absolutely, Jen. So it's a really funny story. All of this was an accident. So I never consciously wanted to be in this space. So let's kind of rewind a little bit.
Okay.
So when I was younger, when I was 19, I went to business school to be an accountant. Of all
Wow.
things.
Okay. Of all things, right?
Of all things. So I wasn't looking to be this. I didn't even know you could get paid to be a communication coach. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I was just focused on what is the guaranteed job that will get me a guaranteed income, because I come from a very poor family, right? My parents were minimum wage workers in factories. Obviously, I got the golden key to life, which is I was born in a first world country in Canada. So I wanted to give myself the guarantee. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I thought entrepreneurs were for people who couldn't get six-figure jobs. So I went to business school. I had my oversized suit on, and I started networking with the big four accounting firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, EY, and I started talking to students, Jen, who are older than me, who had jobs at these companies. And I went to them for wisdom. And I said, how do I get a job on these companies? And they looked at me, Jen, and they said two words: case competitions. And I was like most of our audience listening to this,
You're
what
like,
is
okay.
that? Like, what is that? Like, is that like a cooking competition? I don't know what's going on. And then they explained to me that a lot of these executives of companies host these competitions where students get like a 15-page document and they compete against each other through presentations, and the best ones get jobs. And I said, oh, that's my ticket out of poverty. So I took it. So I started doing these competitions. I got really, really good at speaking through this circuit. But then how I became a coach, I didn't really convince anyone, Jen. What happened is I got really good at speaking. And then I was probably 19 and a half, 20. I started to be a mentor for all of the students who are coming up in this case competition program. So it wasn't like me saying, I want to be a communication coach. I just looked at our group of students, because I was the head of the program at that point, after winning so many of these and losing a lot of them too, that I was like, all you aren't very good at communication. How about I just figure this out with you? And that's how I learned it, through practice and trial and error.
What would be your top, I guess, 2 or 3 pieces of advice? Because biz pitches are happening right now. I'm seeing all kinds of advertisements, people who are entrepreneurs, or like you said, people who are going into these different organizations and they're having to pitch themselves, for whatever it is that they're trying to get, whatever position it is that they're going for. What were some of those lessons learned from you that you were able to say, this is kind of like the golden ticket right here?
So one thing I want to start with, which I'm sure you'll appreciate as a fellow communication expert, is why I teach it this way. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, right? So one of those balls is storytelling, another one is body language, another one is smiling, another one is eye contact, and the list goes on. So this can be very confusing for someone who's starting their journey in communication. So the way that I've simplified this for folks that are listening to this, or really in general for the world, is what are the 3 easiest balls to juggle? Because if we can juggle 3 balls, that'll give us the
Yeah.
confidence that, yeah, maybe I can juggle 18 too.
Right.
And that's really the key. So let's start with those. I call them my easy 3s. I'll pause after each one so you can jump in as well. Ball number 1, the random word exercise. Pick a random word like pistachios, like lights, master, trophy case, tissue box, and create random presentations out of thin air. Why does this matter? Because it helps you think on your feet. But the second piece, and I tell my execs this all the time, if we can make sense out of nonsense, we can make sense out of anything. So just wake up every day, pick 5 different words, give 5 different mini 60-second presentations. If you do that for a month, you'll be way better at impromptu.
I love that idea. As a matter of fact, it reminds me when I would teach public speaking and we would go over impromptu speeches, I would tell my students, you can do this anywhere. And I would give them a little formula to try to make it a little easier for them to organize their thoughts very quickly. And I would tell them, you're driving in your car, you're at the red light. Just look over. What word do you see on the sign? Or look at a store. What word do you see on the store sign? And just use that as your prompt to go ahead and just create a little mini speech about that topic, whatever it is. And we would also use fortune cookies. So I'd bring a little box of fortune cookies and we'd open them up in class and can we eat them? Yes, of course. You can eat them. Go ahead and eat the damn cookie. But then you have to make a speech out of it. And that ended up being so much fun. Just, because you know how fortunes are. Some of them just absolutely like, how in the hell do I make a speech out of this? Well, hey, let's talk about that. How would you make a speech out of that? So I love that idea of picking 5 words and practicing this. That's something else that I heard you say, and I have repeated it over and over and over again. Public speaking, communication, it's a skill, just like any other skill. You have to practice at it to get good at it. We're all a work in progress. So I'm so happy to hear you say that. You just that constant just going through it, the 5 words and practicing it. You'll get more comfortable. You get more confident in it. That's fantastic.
Can I jump as a side note? Oh, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was just going to say we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and Lorinda is joining us. And she has actually put in a couple of questions. Expert communicator, how does one know they have this skill? So that's one question I would like to go over. How do you know if you have the skill? Therapists are jumping ship to become coaches. Yeah, that's going to be, let's table that for a moment. What are your thoughts about this? Because I think that's going back to one thing that I had mentioned earlier about just random people wanting to come on the show to talk about communication because they've been communicators their whole lives. And I'm interested to hear what Brenden has to say about that. But let's go back to what you had a thought. I want you to express that thought, and then we'll address what Lorinda was saying in just a moment.
Absolutely. It's just a quick thought. It's more of a question for you. That fortune cookie exercise is so good. Did you invent it? Because I want to cover that in one of my videos and give credit to whoever came up with that.
I do not want to take credit for it, but I cannot remember where the idea came from. I am certain I probably saw it somewhere online from somebody.
It's rare that I'm impressed by an exercise, and that is really good. Like, I need to do that.
It's a brilliant exercise, and it's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. So, yeah. So who was? Oh, you're breathing and drinking at the same time. That's hard. We are professional communicators, y'all. We really are. Yeah, it's kind of like, many things. You have these conversations with other coaches, other consultants, and we all kind of share these brilliant ideas with one another. So I say go for it. It'll help somebody. Go for it. So what Lorinda was saying about, how do you know you're an expert? Let's go back to this expert communicator. How does one know they have the skill? Because what she says is correct. I have noticed that there are a lot of people in the therapy realm who are kind of jumping ship as a therapist, and they're becoming communication coaches, which I can see value in that, but and like other things, I can also see challenges in that. So what do you think about that?
Absolutely. And just a shared principle for the team listening to this. I think what the best in the world have is a shared excitement for other people's tips and tricks. That's why I was so excited, literally, that I was I was so shocked by the quality of what Jennifer shared that I was just like, wow, like I need to implement that's so good, right? So it blew my mind. And I think that's a big piece. In terms of expertise, Jen, here's the way I would break it down, because every expert will give you their own point of view of communication. That's what I think is so fascinating about this industry, is everyone's got their own thesis. Let's start with what my definition of public speaking is. So for me, my definition is, how do we convey an idea for a specific audience to help us achieve a specific outcome? Let me repeat that again, because that's a mouthful. How do we convey an idea in a way that achieves a specific outcome for a specific audience? So of course that definition is wide, because it could be being on a podcast and sharing a message to achieve X. It could be giving a sales presentation at work, but it could also be convincing your significant other that, hey, we should have Mexican tonight and not Chinese food, because they all have specific audiences and specific outcomes, except the last example has an audience of one. So now within that definition, how do I describe someone who is an expert in the skill? I break down my definition in 3 categories: the group that listens to you, the group that takes action for you, and the group that shares your ideas. So what does being an expert mean, in my opinion? If somebody who's a total stranger is able to listen to your idea, take action on the idea, and share it with other people, you're an expert in my view. That's the way that I define expertise in this space.
Excellent. So as far as therapists jumping ship, I think one of the positive aspects of that, and I'm sure that you have thought about this in terms of communication, is there are a lot of frameworks that come from the therapy world that are incredibly useful for communication coaches, even though we are not therapists, though. And that's the thing I always have to stress to anyone that I'm working with is I am not a therapist. Like, my realm is communication skills. I can help you craft your message. I can help you become more confident in your message. I can help you strategically look at how you might want to present, your message to different audiences. But I am not a therapist. And so there are some things that I am not going to be qualified to help you with if there are some deeper issues, other than, some of the things that you and I would typically dive into. I think that's one thing to be mindful of for anyone who's looking for a coach. If it's a communication coach, if you need someone who has that therapy background, I think it's great. But if you're just looking for someone who is a communication coach, a consultant, you're an organization, you need help with your communication plan, you need help with your workforce in order to help them, turn groups into teams, you need help with your managers learning how to adapt to different communication scenarios, that's a completely different area. So I'm glad that Lorinda brought up the question about therapy and communication specialists and how they are kind of jumping ship and getting into the coaching world, because I do see value in it. I just think for anyone who's looking for coaching and any type of communication consulting, look at the coach and what is their background, and are they going to be able to fulfill your need? Whatever it is that problem is that you're trying to solve, is their background and their experience, their expertise, is that going to be the correct background? Because what Brenden just said is absolutely correct. I mean, we all come from all of these different experiences and backgrounds. So it's not going to be equivalent, all the way around. Lorinda had a follow-up question as well. She wants to jump into, if you're an introvert, how do you become an expert communicator? I think that kind of links back to her first question of how do you know if you're an expert communicator? So an introvert, what can us introverts do? Because full disclosure, I am probably one of the biggest introverts that anyone could meet in their life. But I've just learned how to turn it on and off, when I've needed to. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Jen. So here's what I'll say for introverts. There's a misconception that introverts are bad communicators. I don't think that's true, because a lot of the best students I've coached in my 7-year career thus far are all pretty good. So here's the way I think about it. let's shift that perspective a little. Let me prove why introverts are actually better communicators or really good at 3 specific things that I actually struggled learning being an extrovert that I am. So here's the first one, listening. Introverts are way better at listening than extroverts because, as you probably know, Jen, they speak less on average. So naturally,
Yes.
if we just do the math on time, if we're speaking less, we're naturally listening more. So it's easier for us to adapt the message to the audience. Somebody like me, no. I struggle with listening for a long time because I like to talk. That's why I'm a podcast guest. And I don't host as much because I just go talk. I just want to talk, right? So because of that, I needed to actually do a lot more deeper work and inner work to figure out listening at a deeper level. So that's one. And I still have a lot to go. The second piece is pausing. The most important skill in communication, as I'm sure you cover on every episode of this podcast, is how to pause effectively. But guess what? Introverts don't really struggle with this because they live in silence. They are already comfortable in silence. So whenever I coach an introvert on how to do this, it's a very short conversation. Oh, you just want me to pause in the presentation? Sure. Extroverts, it's a lot harder because whenever we're at a party, whenever we're at an event, and there's a space, we immediately want to fill it up. Oh, well, actually, Jen, what's your favorite color? So what happens is extroverts actually struggle a lot more to pause in a presentation than introverts do. And finally, number 3, and this is not well known, accessibility. Introverted speakers are actually more accessible to a wider group of individuals than an extrovert is. Example, Gary Vaynerchuk. I love the guy. I completely respect his work. He's a big mentor of mine and hero. But you either like the guy or you don't.
There's no in between.
There really isn't. Like, it's either you're like me and you're saying Gary's the best. That's why I use him as an example. Or, no. This person is not for me. I can't believe he's swearing at people. This is crazy. But nobody says that about Brene Brown, Jen.
Yeah.
You know what words have never been uttered in the history of humanity? I hate Brene Brown. Because if you say that, the FBI, the CIA, the SWAT team's going to come to your house and
I think you're right.
So yeah, I think the key here is leverage your strengths and triple down on them.
I'm so happy to hear you say that and to focus on the strengths of introversion. One of the challenges that I think as an introvert is difficult to help other introverts understand is that in order to be effective, let's say public speaking, for example, you don't have to be the entertainer who jumps through hoops, who does cartwheels, who tells jokes, who is constantly getting the audience to laugh. You don't have to be the entertainer. The most important thing is the message. And as an introvert, I think we intuitively know that the most important thing is the message and just making sure that the other person is understanding and getting that message. So like you said at the beginning, figuring out how can I send this message in a way that this particular audience is going to be able to get it, so that I can have the outcomes that I'm hoping to get, gain a desired response from the audience. And so that can be it's a mindset thing. I have found, especially when I have worked with students of public speaking who are introverts, they feel that they have to, like the extroverts, they get up there, hey, how's it going? Hey, everybody, here's a joke, It's like, no. So that mindset thing, what have you said to introverts that you've worked with to try to get them to understand that you don't need to be like anybody else? Don't try to be like anybody else because you're just going to be a pale comparison to them. Just reach in and find your own strengths. What do you say to them to try to help them to understand that mindset?
100%, Jen. And that's what's fun about this industry. Everyone's going to give you a different answer. Yeah. The way that I think about it is, one, I just prove it to them. So I show them videos of like Simon Sinek's got a very quick interview on YouTube.
Love him.
Where he just goes, yeah, I'm an introvert. I'm really shy, but when I speak on stage, I just turn on my speaking, and then if you come and talk to me, you won't recognize me. You'll say, "What? Yeah. Wasn't that guy on the stage?" So there's that. But then there's the other piece, which is actually there's 3 parts. Let's go to the second one. Let's talk about relationship building. So what I have introverts to do whenever they're talking to people, which is also a key part of communication, is I actually don't have them talk at all. So if somebody comes up to them and says, "Hey, what are you up to?" I literally tell them to put their hand on the other person's shoulder and say, enough about me. Forget about me. I want to hear more about you. Yeah. And then the introvert just asks them questions. It's all about the extrovert, and the extrovert loves them. And They sing Kumbaya. So that's the second piece. Works every time. The third piece, though, is I don't really focus on talking with them. I focus on doing. So for the introvert, I say, okay, so you're scared of communication. You're worried about it. I'm not going to ask you to tell a joke today. I'm not going to ask you to do this. How about we just focus on filler words and nothing else? Let's not worry about extroverts versus introverts. Let's just get the filler words out. We get the filler words out. Let's focus on the pausing. We get the pausing. Let's focus on vocal projection and do that. And then eventually they forget they even had the question because they're so good at this point that they just go, oh, well, I could be better. And then the mindset barrier breaks. In other words, Jen, my thesis on this is I believe that them practicing a lot is the easiest way to break that mindset barrier versus actually having a thoughtful 3-hour conversation with them. I think just having them work for 3 hours gets some results much faster.
I agree with that 1,000%. I think that is fantastic advice. Just do it, practice it. You'll become more comfortable and more competent and more confident, as you go through that, as you're practicing it. Why do you think the idea of practicing your communication skills or practicing public speaking, why do people get so nervous at that? What is we do this every day, right? We do it every day. We talk all the time. Like you and I, we're talking right now. Why do people get so nervous at the thought of working on this skill that we all naturally get into every day anyway?
It's a wonderful question, Jen. I've thought about this for many years, just talking to different people. And I feel today I have an answer that makes sense. So let's think about this. Where do we learn how to speak from a formal perspective? The answer for all of us listening, just regardless of where you live, is school. Elementary school, high school. That's where we learn how to speak. But the problem, Jen, is all of those presentations have 3 fundamental issues. The first one is all of them are mandatory. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, hey, Jen, you want to get breakfast and present all day? Nobody says that.
No.
Right? So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is all of those presentations, you're never presenting something you're passionate about. So whenever you're talking, it's never, hey, Jen, what are you excited about? Are you excited about Yoda, books, right? I just see a little Yoda there. Some use as an
Grogu.
Right? Right? Or I even got that wrong, so I'm so bad at sci-fi. So, right, you're excited about, all the amazing things that you do. No, you got to talk about Shakespearean poetry.
Right.
And then after you're done Shakespearean poetry, you got to talk about the history of Missouri. And you're like, do I even live in Missouri? Like, why do I have to?
And I die a little more inside every time.
Right. And the third thing, we're not even done yet. I wish we were done. All of these presentations, I have no idea why you put 12, 13, 14-year-olds through this, are all punishable. So if you don't do a great job, you get slapped in the face.
Right. Yes.
So we grow up with terrible memories of communication. So we believe that it's a chore and nobody wants to get better at doing the dishes.
I am so glad to hear you make that connection. One of the things that I talk about, especially when we talk about conflict management, if you come from a background, you come from a home where it was more of children are to be seen, not heard. And instead of involving you in family discussions, or instead of asking you, well, what do you think about this issue, that we're facing right now, whether it's something that's going on in the news or something that the family is going through, or if you're just asking your son or daughter, they're coming to you with a problem and you're just helping guide them to the answer rather than just telling them what you think they should do. I think when you come from households like that, and then if you do speak up, you get in trouble for it. I think that also it is something similar to what you're saying is we have trained young people to not offer their opinions on things. And if they do happen to offer their opinion or tell you what they think about something, there might be some fear attached to that because, oh, what if they don't like what I have to say? Or what if they disagree with me and now I'm going to get in trouble? I think that's a huge piece of what's happening today, even in the division that we're experiencing in our society. One of my goals is to help people become more comfortable with having difficult conversations. And I think you just nailed it on the head, going back to the schools. How can we expect young people to be comfortable having difficult conversations when we're punishing them for not even being able to talk about Shakespeare, in a way that satisfies us. So with the work that you do with coaching, I want to go through some of the things that you use to coach entrepreneurs and some of the higher level, maybe C-suite, type of leaders. What are some things that we can learn from that we can drill down? And so the everyday Joe, the everyday person can be able to practice this on a daily basis.
Absolutely, Jen. So let's rewind this conversation a little bit when we were talking about the easy threes. Went through what are the three easy things? And we covered the first ball, which is the random word exercise. Take a random word, but there's two other balls. So let's cover those two. And if everyone listening to this just does these three every single day, I have never met a single person in my career who has done these three things consistently without knowing them, without talking to me or seeing me on a podcast. So if you're just doing that's great. And then of course I'm more than happy to have the advanced conversation going to GVO and how I train some of the world's best and how to be the best. But let's start with the easy stuff that everyone can do. So random word exercise, 5 minutes a day, every day. Everyone's got 5 minutes. Everyone showers. Everyone's listening. So I'm hoping. So just do it in there. 2, the question drill. We get asked questions all the time in our life, Jen. At work, at school, on a podcast. But a lot of us are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, when I started podcasting as a guest, I was terrible. Really, really bad. When somebody asked me that brilliant question you asked me earlier, I have a great answer now. But 3 years ago, when somebody said, "Hey, where do you think the fear of communication comes from?" I looked at him and said, "I don't know, dude. San Diego, Los Angeles. I don't know, man. It's not.
I don't know. It's stupid."
I had no idea because no one really answers the question well until I came out. There's probably some other people who have some good answers, but it didn't make any sense. But the point is, I sucked. I was reactive to that question. So how did I fix this? The way that I fixed this is every single day, Jen, I took a question that I knew somebody was going to ask me about my expertise, my products or services, and I would answer that question for 5 minutes a day. And I would pick a different question every day. If you do this for a year, Jen, with only 5 minutes of prep, you'll have answered 365 questions about your industry, and you'll be absolutely bulletproof. And that's what I recommend people do.
That is such a fantastic recommendation. Wow, y'all listen up. We are getting some really great advice here from the communication ace himself. That's what I start calling you, the communication ace. Actually, this is a really great question. I'm just looking here. Lorinda's, she's following along. She's fantastic. She's just loving this. She notices communicators use a lot of hand gestures. So let's talk about that for a moment. What do you say? I know what I say to my students when they ask me about hand gestures. What do I do with my hands? And I always make fun of, I always go back to Ricky Bobby, the movie, when he's being interviewed by the press. And he's like, "What do I do with my hands? What do I do with my hands?" And he's like, he has no idea. What do you say? I tell him, do you worry about your hands when you're having a conversation? Naturally, you probably don't. So why are you trying to focus on it now? What do you say to that?
I am learning so much from this conversation, Jen. You're a real professional. A lot of the times when I go on calls, I was like, okay, are they really I've learned so much from this that I did not know prior to this conversation that I'll be implementing. So I really appreciate really great insights. You're the first person in my career to have the same opinion that I do. Because there's so many body language experts. No, I'm literally shocked that you have the same opinion. It's amazing because it's true. I was so shocked when I got into this industry. And by the way, no offense to body language experts. There's a lot I've learned from Alan Pease. He's a true master at what he's done. And I've learned a lot and I've applied that with my clients. But using my 18-ball analogy, I've always believed body language is ball number 15 with the one exception. Only one. And the exception is facial expressions.
Yes.
That's the only exception. Smiling a little bit, making sure you're popping your face a little bit. Yeah. But other than that, you're right. For me, body language is a distraction. You got to do the random word exercise first. You got to do the question drills, and then you build up to that.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like when people ask, how do I be a better listener? How do I engage in active listening? And then you'll hear the listening experts tell them, well, make sure you lean in and you nod your head. And that indicates to them that you're listening. It's like, well, no, if you're focusing on that, then you're not listening. If you're really listening, you're going to naturally do that. Right? So I feel like we're focusing on the wrong things here. So thank you for that question, Lorinda. I think it's important to throw that in there. I do have a couple of more questions I wanted to ask you in regards to online communication. Thanks to the world we live in, and online communication is nothing new. We've been doing this for a very long time, but I think in the age of COVID, we have, been thrust into hyperdrive of really focusing on a hybrid workforce, or some people are just working from home permanently. So we're using Zoom, we're using StreamYard, we're using all of these programs, we're on our phones, FaceTiming. What are some of the similarities and what are some of the differences do you think are important to highlight for anyone who wants to have a more professional, type of communication? Because I've seen some really bad online interviews. And so I'm curious to hear, what do you think we need to do to solve this issue?
Absolutely, Jen. So there's a couple parts there. Let's start with the first one, which is the final ball of my easy threes, which ties into your question on online presentations. Just make a list of 3 to 5 people you love the most in your life and ask yourself a simple question. When was the last time you sent them a 20-second video message just saying how grateful you are to have them in your life? And most people, they go like, how do I post on social media? How do I go online? I was like, why don't you start with your family? Why don't you send some videos?
Yes.
And what I have some execs do as well is I have their kids send videos to their grandparents or their distant relatives, and it always makes their day, and it encourages the kid to keep presenting on video too. So that's the third easy ball. So question drills, video messages, random word exercise. If you do all 3 of those things every day for 15 minutes, you're all set. So now with that said, let's jump into online presentations. So you're absolutely right. A good way of summarizing your thought, Jen, is online presentations have shifted from a nice to have to a must have, even in a post-COVID era, where now it's a toolkit that you just need to have if you want to compete in the marketplace. Whereas before it was just a huge advantage because no one really thought about it, but now it's really a must. So here's how I say it. There's 3 main differences between in-person and online. The first one is eye contact, which I'm sure you've covered before. So when you're in person and you have a group of people, you're constantly moving your head to meet people in the eye. Thankfully, online, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's easier and harder. It's harder because you don't have that same eye contact, but it's easier because I don't have to look at people directly anymore in the eye. Even if I'm speaking to 10,000 people, let's on a Zoom call, I just have to look at the camera lens directly. And that's how we should be communicating our thoughts, because it gives the illusion that I'm looking at you directly. So that's one. The second difference is really in regards to audience accessibility. So when we're in person, it's a lot easier to get feedback from our audience. We just have lunch with them. Hey, like Jen, I would love to get your thoughts. And then you just give me feedback. And it's easy because you're right in front of me. There's no friction. But online, there's a lot more friction because the screen is just one side and the call just ends. So you want to try and get on calls with people. Not always, but for presentations that really count, get on a few of them just so you imagine them in your mind as you're presenting. It gives you more energy. Which brings me to number 3, the last one. Energy. Look, at the end of the day, Jen, it is impossible, in my opinion, to show up with the same level of energy online as you would in person, for the simple reason of accountability. So when you're in person, you feel that pressure. You feel like you need to take a shower 5 a.m. in the morning because you're hugging people. Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Oh, no. I'm just laughing because you're right. You do feel the pressure to shower. Whereas when you're home, it's like, oh, as long as I look good from waist up, we're okay.
Right?
So, I'm sorry, continue.
No,
I
please.
just had to chuckle at that because I was like, he sees me.
No, you're all good. But exactly, right? Like even in this conversation, I'm obviously taking this very seriously and very excited at the same time because I got a couple of nuggets I need to implement. But I'm still wearing sweatpants. It's just you don't see it because
Right.
it's just up. You just see the top. So because of that, the only way to show up with more energy online, Jen, is really two ways. One is to present better in person, because it's easier for you to show up with energy and you just transfer as much of that as possible. Like, I'm a rocket when I'm in person. So because of that, I can bring a good percentage of that back online. And the second one is really just getting on a Zoom call with people who aren't nice. You go, look, Brenden, your background sucks. Like, you're not presenting this. You got to change your tones. And then you live up to the expectation of your audience.
Tell me about feedback. A lot of people are hesitant about that, so we're keeping in mind the online, communication. And I'm thinking in terms of organizations. How would you suggest a manager give feedback to employees who are not really embracing the online communication thing? Like we said, talk into the camera, be mindful of your facial expressions. You want to lean in as much as you can, using this method of communication. How does one help another person improve their online presence when it's needed?
Once again, everyone's got their own opinions. But what
Yeah.
I will say is, for me, in a corporate setting, when people aren't fully bought in, because that's not who I work with. I work with people who are fully bought in. They're like, I want to be better, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be in the top 1%. That's my niche. But in the context of corporate, I like a tiered system. So a tiered system means the following. There's a term in our industry, in the training space, called hypo, not hippo, hypo. So hypos just mean high potentials. Who are the people that you know in your organization that are just all stars? These are the rising stars in your org, regardless of the role, that you know are going to level up. They're going to be VPs in 2 years, basically. For those people, I always start with them in an organization. So whenever I'm advising my B2B clients, I always say, those are the people you want to invest in coaching. Those are the people you want to love, because they're bought in. And then what happens is, when you upskill their communication like 10 times better than the average employee in the org, it creates a different culture for the rest of the organization, where it says, hey, if you want to get promoted to the next level, you don't have to get promoted if you don't want to. But if you want that, you tie it to an incentive. If you want that promotion, look how well Jason's communicating in the boardroom.
Right.
Look how well Julia's performing there. And that's how we trickle it down. And then the last piece that I always advise people to think about is, for me, feedback has always been easy wins first. So for me, it's never about, here are the 10 things we need to work on together. It's about, we take the 10 things that we believe that person should work on, and we rank that list from easy to hard, and we just give the easiest one first, and we celebrate. Wow, great job on doing this, Jen, or great job on doing this, Brenden or Brian. Then we go to the next one. The next one, you slowly stack the feedback. You don't just give it all at once.
I love that you take this into tiny little bites. And I've noticed that that's been a theme in many of your answers. And I think that is so correct. That's, right on the money right there. When it's so easy to become overwhelmed. Because you're right, when we start talking about this communication process, it's chaotic. There are a million things happening at one time. And if you try to just digest it all at once, you're going to end up with a serious stomach ache. You don't want to put yourself through that. So these tiny little bites that you're talking about, I love that. And you made me think about one of the things that I did. You were talking about with the online communication, and how do we become more lively, right, in our communication. And I know for me, when I'm in person, I'm the same way. I can use the stage. I'm very comfortable, in that realm. I like to think that I'm building a relationship with individuals in the audience. And so that gives me the energy I need. When you're sitting in front of your screen and you're looking, it's just not the same when you're looking into the webcam. But one of the things that I notice, if I stand up, I can get closer to that same amount of energy, that feeling that I get when I'm standing on stage. So I invested in a standing desk, one of those that you can lift up and put. So it was just as simple as, okay, here's a tiny little change. I'm going to put everything on the standing desk. And whenever I do a podcast like this, I lift it up. I'm going to stand. And that way I have a little more energy, a little more ability to move around, because I know that's how I am when I stand up to do my presentations. So I just wanted to give that as an example to the audience of the things that you're talking about. I really appreciate how you're looking at communication and how you're looking at building those skills, just one tiny thing at a time. Just one tiny change can make a huge impact on how effective you can be as a communicator. I've absolutely loved having this conversation with you. Do you have a question that I haven't gotten to yet?
Absolutely, Jen. So here's what's. By the way, this was a real treat for me. I actually have notes, mental notes. Normally, literally at this point, if this was just a coffee conversation, I would literally get a notepad and just take notes on everything you shared. So I need to keep remembering them, which is great. So there's one piece I'll cover, and it's a simple question. And the question is this, Jen. How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? The biggest problem I have with this industry, and that's why I entered it, and I knew I could be successful in it even when I was, 19 or something, is because even the PhDs I saw in communication kept referencing our space from a negative, energetic perspective. They kept saying the fear of communication, glossophobia, all this stuff. I said, well, that's probably the worst way to actually make someone better at this. So here's my vantage point. We all dream about everything that we want in our lives. Our business growth, our families, our vacations, the expensive watches, the cars we want to get. When was the last time we dreamed about our communication skills? And the answer for most of us is never. So how about we start now? How would your life change if you became an exceptional communicator? You don't need to get a next promotion at work. It doesn't need to be about growing your business. What about being a better mother for your children, a better father for your kids, making new friends? Because communication is about leading a more fulfilling life. And once we realize that, then it'll create the incentive internally to do the random word exercise, to do the question drills, and to send those video messages to the people we really care about in our life.
Preach, Brenden, preach. I love it. I love it. Motivational speaker right here. How do we get in touch with you?
So 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. Just type MasterTalk in one word. There's hundreds of free videos there on how to communicate ideas, and we release a new one every week. And the second way to keep in touch is come to one of my live workshops on communication that's on Zoom. So I do this for free every 2 weeks. And even if you're shy and introverted, you could just turn off your camera and just jump in the call. And the website is rockstarcommunicator.com.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure that all of that information is in the show notes, so it'll be easily accessible for anybody who just wants to click on those links. Brenden, this has been such a treat for me. I absolutely love it when I can have a communication ace on my show where we can just have this type of a conversation. And I have learned so much from you. I know the audience has learned so much from you. This has been such an incredibly wonderful gift to have you here. And I'm just so thankful that you have created this space where you just want to invite others in so that you can help them just become the best version of them. And I love that question that you ask, how would your life be, if you were an excellent communicator? That's such an important question to ask. Thanks again.
Of course, Jen. Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. Well, you have a great rest of your Monday. I hope this was a great way to get it started. I think it was. So have a great Monday. Have a great rest of your week. Remember to take care of one another and keep practicing those communication skills. All right, y'all, take care. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review. Imagine your favorite online dating app, but instead of using it for finding dates, you are booking podcasting interviews. Podmatch uses similar technology to match the ideal podcast host with the ideal podcast guest for interviews. I know it works because that's how I get so many awesome guests for my show. I used to spend hours scouring my social media channels, hoping to be able to find just one reliable guest for my show. Now I simply log into Podmatch and let the program do all the work. It really is just that easy. And if you are a podcaster looking for compatible guests, or you are a guest looking to be on a reputable podcast, sign up for Podmatch today by clicking on the link in the show notes.